Hi everyone, welcome to today's workshop, Writing for Grants as a Visual Artist. Just a quick introduction to me for those of you who don't know me. My name is Chris Bennie. I am a board member at The Walls and have been a professional artist for about the last 15 or so years. I've had I've been in the educational environment for quite some time within art contexts, having completed an honours degree in visual arts in 2004 and a doctorate of visual arts in 2009, 2010. And I've been consistently working as an artist, not only during those years, but since, and supporting my contemporary art practice with a number of freelance activities, including writing and proposing for grant opportunities, some successful and others not. And just in terms of some of those successful awards, they've included the Regional Arts Development Fund under the Germinate framework, and Australia Council New Work for both emerging and established categories, Arts Queensland Development and Presentation Grant, a Creative Sparks Grant, an Asia Links Grant, a Regional Arts Fund Grant, and on a public art note, the Urban Oasis Public Art Mentorship opportunity that the Gold Coast Council offered a few years ago. Now, in addition to that, what has been really interesting in my career is the opportunity to sit on assessment boards and committees for grants and residency and exhibition opportunities. So I think I have a good deal of insight into both sides of the application coin. And what I intend to do in this particular session is focus primarily on the Germinate application, just with the assumption of the context that I'm speaking from, so the Walls art space based on the Gold Coast, and our primary attendees or clients or support network. But what I encourage you to consider that with the tips and the strategies and the tricks that I'm going to present to you, that these are applicable across all grants as a way of approaching them, preparing for them, and writing the application in a way that's comprehensible for the assessment committee. So I'd just like to run through some images really to begin the presentation or workshop, and just to show you kind of the fun side of this process, the outcomes. So when you are successful in a grant, you do realize a project that you have invested a lot of your heart and soul into its development and preparation and ultimately presentation. And so there's a great sense of achievement at the end of that project. And so I'm just going to show you quite quickly 3 different projects, and this one's particular to today's workshop because I'm going to be focusing on the grant that I wrote specifically for the event that you're looking at the moment, or rather a series of events, which was called under the umbrella term Sound Series. 3 events across 2019 at the Walls Art Space that showcased local and somewhat regional, including Brisbane, electronic musicians, techno musicians, giving them an opportunity to perform their music live as opposed to DJing within the Walls Art Space, that fantastic quasi warehouse context of the Walls, and really giving these artists an opportunity to present their music and which is what I really consider their art form, within a context and to an audience that is receptive of things that might be a little bit more not so mainstream, in particular within that context of large-scale festivals, music festivals that are very popular around the world. So these are just some images or documentation of the actual events, the 3 different events at various different times throughout the year, showing our audience, showing the engagement, and ultimately showing the what I believe the wonderful success of the project. But I'll talk a lot more in detail about how that project came from an idea to its development, to its application and actual realization. Another project that has been a very significant part of my career is a project called MSSR, which stands for the Morton Street Spare Room Project. It was a artist-run initiative, so an artist-run space that I developed in the spare room of a Queenslander home I used to live in Brisbane, in New Farm. And it ran from about 2006 to about 2010 or 11, and actually did a lot of different things. Its primary focus was the exhibition of contemporary artists, mostly solo shows, within the confines of a small spare room in that house. So, as you can see, tongue and groove walls, wooden floor. We showed, I think, 16 different artists over that period. In that context, utilized that context for its domestic reality, I guess you would say, and would offer things like tea and bickies and cake at openings, or do artist talks in a completely informal way as opposed to what was taking place at the newly built Gallery of Modern Art at the time in Brisbane. And what was interesting about that project, a lot of the artists extended beyond that spare room and moved out into other parts of the house, including outside. As you can see in this shot, one of our artists, Giles Ryder, built a 6 metre by 3 metre screen in the backyard for a abstract video art projection, which was fantastic. Yes, and that's just an example of someone working in the lounge room. And reutilizing that existing screen. So we left that up for about 3 years, I think. So that was a great resource for MSSR. It became a popular spot for artists to project work onto. But yeah, you can definitely see the domestic and quotidian nature of the space, including the chicken coop in the front of the photograph. And the nature of an artist-run space is it's often quite dynamic and include multi-art forms, and we certainly did, including experimental sound events as well as traditional forms of art making. What was really important about that project is its contribution to culture. That was kind of the base motivation for me. Wasn't primarily just to show work of myself or my peers, but to really think about what it is to be making art in Brisbane, if not nationally, if not even internationally. And to do that, what seemed important was to make sure there was some sort of writing accompanying each exhibition. And so the funding that we got actually supported not only paying artists, but paying writers to do I think it was about 500-word essay. But that art could take shape in a lot of different ways. And that's what was interesting about that project too, like working with artists that were writers that would do a different response. And I think in this case, this artist, Dave Smith, may have just supplied drawings and sketches and notes for their essay, whereas this is Giles's catalogue essay, and it's quite a rhizomic approach to the idea of the written written response to an exhibition. Representation is also another important part of a project in many aspects of the application process, as well as the realization of a project. So how your audience is made aware of the project, and so having a style guide was important to MSSR, particular way of listing the artists and use of logos and whatnot. So every exhibition had a unique A4 printed flyer, which sort of doubled as a poster if people wanted it to be so. And on the back of these images would be the essay. In addition to the printed stuff, we were very pedantic about all the knowledge and the documentation being in an online context for future research purposes. That was MSSR. And lastly, just a race through an individual project, a solo project of mine called Grace and the Kissing Swans sculpture project. Some of you might be familiar with this. It has been a very successful project for me in my career, having won the Swell Sculpture Festival in 2013. If you're not familiar with it, what you're actually looking at is two flooded caravans from Bundaberg, Queensland, that I was gifted for the purpose of a cultural sculpture project. The whole project was very ambitious for me in my career at that particular point, but I always say it had a lot of serendipity to it, because not only was this monumental in terms of moving these large objects around, it was quite costly, and the project could really only be achieved through the support of Australia Council New Work grant. So I'm just sort of showing these things to show you how these projects evolve in a quite an unknowing way, and I'm very pedantic about documenting everything as it takes place. Obviously, it's quite useful for a presentation like this, but it also this is also very important for the application process for funding, showing that organisation that you are working towards your goals and aspirations and dreams, or possibly the particular project they're actually applying for. This is the final piece. I mean, it doesn't look too much different from the original caravan, but that was essentially part of the concept of the work. The transformation of a flooded object. So yeah, because it was from Bundaberg in 2013, it was, yeah, I got the caravans because of that particular geographical and environmental event that took place. So I felt that the caravans had a potency or a trauma or aura, you might say, that was completely interesting, and that their transformation, a slight transformation, you might say, just through the inclusion of, as you can see in this image, the projection. So there's a projection of performance videos inside the caravan. So that's what I mean by transformation, was enough to signal that this is an interesting cultural artifact. So just some documentation of the piece in Swell, which, as you can imagine, was quite a curious inclusion in that event. A little bit bamboozling for many people, I'd say. But I think I lucked out in many ways, because it was the first year that Swell was offering a non-acquisitive award for their event. So previously it was acquisitive, so the winner's work got acquired by the City Council for presentation or placement somewhere along the city. And in that sense, the works had to adhere to some OH&S and sort of public concerns. So when they made it non-acquisitive, then a piece like this that was engaging, I guess, in much more conceptual concerns, and clearly not the best in terms of all of those things that are specific to public art. I'm going to just fly through some images that show you the work in its development, again, as a way of highlighting the importance of representing your idea to a funding body as well as possible, to give them a visual clue about what you want to do, in addition to the responses to the specific written criteria. So it doesn't need to be flash. In my understanding of things, in some ways, your bad collaging technique is actually quite useful in terms of showing an authenticity and an artist's voice in the representation of their idea. So you essentially there you're looking at a badly organized perspective in collage with some labeling. I think it might be in whiteout pen. Yeah. But it's part of my practice, you might say, if people have seen a bit more of my work, that playful nature, the inclusion of the hand in the shot, this idea of the humanness behind the project, I think was always important as well. So it's been a great deal of time, and that's part of the job in my mind as an artist, is trying to articulate to myself what the project will be. So these images are more collages that took place quite a long time before the project started to make itself known to me. I don't even think I had the caravans at this particular point, but I'm brainstorming what a caravan, like a old or degraded caravan, might look like within the context of Currumbin Beach. Okay, so that's 3 insights into my practice and how I've utilized grants in an effective way. Let's hang out with Gold Coast City Council Radif for a bit. Just a screen grab from the website, and I really encourage you all to make sure you visit the website and download the application form, download the guidelines and all that sort of stuff to familiarize familiarize yourself with what's being asked of you, and actually even if you can apply. So there's often a lot of stipulations that make you just not able to apply for the grant. So you want to make sure you understand all those things before you spend too much time either thinking about what you want to do or even starting the application process. Now within the Gold Coast City Council funding, everything is benchmarked or funneled through the cultural strategy. That's available in many spots on the website, and also worth a read. It's very important to read, I would say, but I don't know if it's a running joke, but there is the sentiment that it is very, very vague and quite difficult to really ascertain what exactly does the council want. But I will try and address that a little bit more in the following breakdown of the specific questions within the Germinate grant, and try and give some tips and strategies to counter when anything is quite ambiguous in what they're asking from you. And I think this is a particular strategy for a lot of funding organizations. Okay, that's the website that you end up, if you do a Google search on Gold Coast City Council Radif Germinate grant, and you see just right down the bottom 3 options: activate music, and Germinate. I'm delivering this on the vague understanding that many of you probably haven't applied for a grant before, and in that sense, starting with Germinate is a really good option. It's the $5,000 grant that is rolling, so you can apply at any time during the year, and you can get notice after your application, I think within about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. So things can happen reasonably quickly in terms of the funding world. The next level up, I would say, is Activate. And quite often, a lot of Activate applicants are developing something that happened in Germinate, and that's a really good thing to see as a committee, that those applicants or those artists, they're working through their ideas and their career goals and aspirations in a quite a methodical way. So certainly if you haven't ever applied for a grant before, you definitely want to, I would encourage you to look into Germinate first, and then maybe move up to Activate. And it's just because Activate, you can ask for more money. And I'm not quite sure what that limit is at the moment, but in the past, it's not uncommon to see budgets sort of averaging around $20,000. Okay, that's also another screen grab from that same site, just listing who can apply. So individuals, you could be part of an organization, company, partnership, or collective, and all applicants must be Gold Coast residents. I think that's almost a bit of a grey area. Certainly wasn't my case, but I guess I've lived on the Gold Coast on and off over the last 20 years. I have a great deal to do with the cultural sector on the Gold Coast. So yeah, your individual circumstances will vary. And if you're doing a lot of the bulk of the work, if not realizing the work on the Gold Coast, you've got a pretty good argument to apply for this funding. All of these unknowns, if you ever get a unknown question like that, or you're a bit unsure, it's simply a phone call. And Dan Carroll is the senior officer at the moment, and really lovely guy. Just give them a call. Okay, so these are the current Germinate questions, and I'm sort of pleased to say that this is a big improvement on what they were last year. So when I did this workshop last year, I had a ball really encouraging the attendees to reconsider what the questions are, because they were completely flawed in my opinion, and also because I was on the assessment committee, or I have been on the assessment committee. My job, I thought, in that workshop was to make sure people could do a much clearer and better job on the application process and sort of read between the lines of what's being asked of them. But I'm happy to say that the questions are a little bit more clear now and less repetitive. But I think many of the things that I spoke about last time, which I will return to this time, are very useful for still the idea of clarity and explaining exactly and precisely what you want to do without too much waffle. So the questions are: tell us about you and your organization, provide a brief introduction to your art form, experience, and previous work. Next question: tell us exactly what your project is, include information about its location, duration, dates, specific logistical details, key milestones, and how they will be achieved. How will this project can contribute to your or your organization's professional development? How does your project contribute to art form development and or culture on the Gold Coast? Tell us the ways your project can positively affect the people involved, the wider community and culture. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about your project? Okay, so I'm going to try and unpack these using the grant that I received for the sound series, and we'll keep returning to these and hopefully be able to I'll hopefully be able to express how you're going to focus on specifically, I'd say, what the question is asking. Because in my experience, there's a lot of additional written, what's the word? Just unnecessary information, and sometimes you can border on the overly conceptual elements of the project when if you put yourself in a committee member's shoes, one of our biggest challenges is to be made sure that whoever's applying can actually pull the project off. And I'll unpack that a little bit more too. All right, but here's a process that I'd like you all to think about and start to develop. And I guess the summary here, before I dive into these points, is that you need time. You need a lot of time to work through all the stuff that needs to take place to write a grant, even if it's just a $5,000 Germinate grant. Now, when I say just, for some of you, that's an amazing amount of money to be able to do something that you have big hopes and dreams about. But we do need to factor in the amount of time that's going to be spent developing the proposal, as well as the amount of time realizing the project. So $5,000 can go quite quickly. All right, so first tip is copy all questions into a Word document and then just have that running and evolving on a daily basis. I believe you need to brainstorm your idea from numerous perspectives. You've got to consider not only what it is, but what it might or could be. You've got to ask yourself who is involved, and then in addition, who else could be involved? When and where will it be? What will it achieve and do? What contribution can it foreseeably make to the region? And this is where you've got to put yourself in Radith's shoes or the shoes of someone in the general public. You need to think about it more in terms of, rather, I want to do this thing, to move that towards, I'm going to do this thing to benefit so-and-so or whoever. So you really need to shift your thinking from the subjective to the objective. Contemplate what your support material will be, and this will vary depending on the proposal, and start the process of contacting people for support letters, acceptance letter, commitment letters, if you are working with other people and that's relevant. So again, remember that people are super, super busy. If you send an email to someone to ask for a reference or support letter and it's due, the application is due in about 3 days, I can sort of say good luck for that one. Strategy around that, to be honest, is to actually write as much of the support letter as you can. So you will help out that individual by supplying a lot of the information, like what the project title is, when will it be, a little bit about you, a little bit about your relationship with the person that you're asking the reference letter for. In a sense, you're drafting 2 or 3 paragraphs ready for them to maybe slightly adjust and then put their signature on to their letterhead. That's going to help you a great deal, and that person is going to appreciate the effort that you put into preparing that support letter for them. Draft responses to the criteria questions. So all of this is part of the unpacking process, and letting the project like fester for a little bit in your own mind, like letting it grow, because sometimes we don't actually know what the project wants to be. We've got a hunch, but many of us, I think, in the grant application world are willing to maneuver what the project will be to fit with the funding model to satisfy their goals and outcomes. That's why working with a funding organisation is a collaboration of sorts. Remember, they are giving you money to realise your project. Then they're not likely to give you the money if you're being completely subjective and selfish about what you want to do. So always think about a kind of mutual relationship when you're working in the grant environment. I'd recommend sitting on your responses for a few days before rereading them. Again, then just start editing those responses and then wait a few more days. This is why I believe in this, like the slow process of preparation. You need to compile all the support material in a single page PDF document, including images of creative outcomes relevant to the proposal. Now, unfortunately, and I've asked them to do this, but they have not included it. It is the for support material, the 1-page PDF, like a running PDF with all of your support material, which would include your CV, your collective CV, images of what the project might look like, images of previous work, your reference letters or support letters, all in one long PDF. Now, I don't know why they're not stipulating that. Some other organisations do. It's more work on your part, but gee whiz, from my experience when I've been on the committee and I've had to open 10 different documents in Smarty Grants that are all different formats, from Word document to a PDF to a JPEG to a PNG, and it clutters up my computer. It's my personal computer too, by the way. I'm employed as a contractor to council. So things get chaotic, and it's just an additional challenge for the assessor. Now, the few occasions when I've seen one PDF that I can open, it's got all the information laid out, even to the degree there might be a little contents on the contents area on the first page, just articulating what I'm about to look at in this document. Stuff like that, that professionalism is going to hold up really, really well in the application process. I guarantee it. And I guess that's why I'm interested in doing workshops like this, to promote and propose that we as cultural contributors do think professionally in terms of how we're going to engage in professional context. Then make any final adjustments to your response if you need to. It's good if you can get someone to read your application, preferably someone experienced. However, a family member or even a friend can provide feedback about your application's clarity. Stress that is what you want feedback on, and not the quality of the idea. So I think that's really important. If you're working with friends or family who are not so familiar with what this art game is and what it can be, you just want to get feedback on, like, does that sentence make sense, or does that paragraph state answer the question that's being asked in the application form. And then you're ready to go. And that's the point where you now go into Smarty Grants and you just copy and paste everything in. So Smarty Grants has got its own kind of, and all online environments for grant applications are similar. They're a little bit, I always get a little bit worried, because there's either kind of a save button at the bottom of each page and then a move on page. And you're never quite 100% sure if everything's been saved correctly. So there's just that little bit of ambiguity, and you just do want to have all that content ready to go in case something happens. So you just cut and paste again. You certainly wouldn't want to write straight into that online application form. Okay, so describe the project or activity you're seeking funding for. Now, this is a really important point, and you just got to be really specific and to the point. One thing that I see happen a lot is that the applicant assumes that we know who the person might be or the collective. You've just got to assume that no one knows you or the project. You also need to describe exactly what the funding will support. And that's enough information to get through that particular question, I would say. There's certainly no need to waffle on about the project and its amazing concept. The people that you're applying to are usually professionals and that have seen a lot of art and kind of know what's of value. So they'll see it in your ability to communicate about exactly what it is. You need to list relevant details to the funding, in particular people being paid and their roles. And it's important to indicate the time frame of the project here too. Okay, so here is the response I gave to the Germinate grant for sound series. Now, just keeping in mind, so we've got slightly different criteria or different questionings. You will just take note, the first question in the new version is describe you and what you're on about, whereas previously it was describe the project. But I just want to highlight this, describing the project, and the activity you're seeking funding for in terms of the efficiency of language. quite often there'll be a word limit, 300 word, or sometimes character, whatever the equivalent might be. So I kick off with the project title, which slightly evolved. That's not a hugely important part, but it's something to show the funding organisation that the project is going somewhere. The title is a good start for that. So the project, Barbara Streisand, and then we explain what it is. So a series of 3 one-night events that showcases the work of live electronic artists, musicians at the Walls Art Space. First sentence, super, super clear, exactly what it is. Then a geographical descriptor. So we're assuming that the committee doesn't know anything about the Walls. The Walls is located in the vibrant and creative industrial suburb of Miami and is an established board-run contemporary art space. Okay, good. So now that committee has the context of the location or understanding of the location or where the event is going to take place and what it is. Each event, so now we're going into a little bit more of a descriptor on what each event is. So I started with sort of an umbrella, big 3 series event idea, and then I'm slowly unpacking what they specifically are, which is actually going to relate to how the budget will evolve. So I start to think about that as I'm reading through this. Each event will feature 4 artists, musicians performing live electronic music. And basically, I'm just going to tell them now. Radical support is to ensure the professional presentation of the artist's, musician's work over the 3 events, beginning on the, and I'm just listing the date that it will start in the actual answers, even though previously in the document, there would have been an area that says, when will your project start? When will your project end? And maybe a heads up on that point, all your projects will have a defined starting point, like you apply at a certain time, but you will not be able to do the project until after a certain date. So the committee has to assess the application, get approved through council, through the different tiers of council, and then they'll let you know, and it has to happen after that date. So just be aware. That's why it's a kind of a slow process, the grant model. And then the last sentence in the first paragraph is really the only conceptual statement. Barbara Streisand aims to create a culture of value around live electronic music and differentiate it from the economies and spectacle of DJ, club and festival culture. That's it. That's the only conceptual hoo-ha and hullabaloo and gee whiz, look how great this project is. You just don't need to. It's about the pragmatics and practicalities of the project. Funding is being sought for separate items within the project budget, including the performance fees, event staffing fees, the PA and mixing desk hire. The first, Barbara Streisand will take place on that date. It currently features those artists. So yeah, I'm telling them it's going ahead. It's another good indication that they can rely on the applicant, because it sounds like it's actually going to happen. Funding will also support project facilitation, management, including sourcing additional performers, utilising existing Walls contacts and networks, and the advice recommendations from confirmed artist musicians. To support local business, the PA and mixing desk will be hired locally, and to ensure sound quality professionalism, greater funding will also support the fees for an audio technician. So this is a good point to refer back to the cultural strategy, where you are really providing an opportunity for a lot of different people. And I think what's been good about this particular application is it's not just the sort of 9 or 10 or 12 musicians or performers that were going to get paid, the artists, so to speak, but another number of other industries and people supported to the realization of the project, including paying a few volunteers to come and work at the bar for the 3 events. So it affected a lot of people in a positive economic and as well as cultural way. So you really need to, that's what I mean by brainstorming your project. How else can you evolve your project so that it's understood or made clear to that funding body that you're actually this willing contributor to culture in the region? So I think that's very important. And to be honest, I haven't seen too many successful applications from people that are doing things just for their own artistic practice. There's been a couple, but generally speaking, maybe let's call it 93%, are all projects that have numerous people involved and contribute to the development of culture in the region in wider ways. Okay, another part of the sentiment of grant writing is what is unique about the project, what's exciting or innovative. This is something you need to try and communicate to not only the RADIF committee, but generally speaking, most funding opportunities. This is where we get into the, in my mind, the understanding on the committee side of things that you're a serious practitioner, that you're really dedicated to the evolution of your work and how your work contributes to culture within the region, potentially nationally, and then maybe even internationally. So I'm quite interested in this particular problem for not only myself as an artist and how do I communicate that, but when I sit on committees and to see if these people are really, really engaged and that I can rely on them to keep moving forward even after this particular project. It's an investment from council to give an individual or a collective or a group money because we want to, or they want to keep growing culture in the region. So we can see through those applications that are a little bit, I've got an idea, I've got no art training, yeah, and they sort of can see them fulfilling their own needs without a kind of a wider berth of engagement with the complexity of culture on the region, in the region. So yeah, to reiterate, if grant writing requires conceptual detail, it should always be just really brief, like I was highlighting in that previous response. I think I might fly through this. Yeah, so this is where, okay, that third paragraph, the cultural strategy is not much use here. Rather, your understanding of your art form's existing status and contribution to the cultural ecology of the region is more helpful. How will what you do add to previous projects or the general status of the art form here on the Gold Coast? And perhaps even more importantly, how will you assess whether you achieve that goal? Okay, so this is an argument for being in the scene, attending lots of different openings. The trouble with the Gold Coast is quite a homogenized environment. And a lot of us that have devoted our life to visual culture and have gone through these, quite substantial academic environments because we're so interested in it, in like the art thing, from a historical and contemporary perspective. You can really see a difference between the people that are engaged and the people that are just staying in the I'm just wanting to do my own thing kind of environment. But it is tricky on the Gold Coast, and especially now with the fact that we don't have an art school, really. Yeah, it's hard to explain, but there's something about immersing yourself into the wider spectrum of culture, visual culture, all sorts of cultural and context to then be able to know where you fit into the bigger scheme of things. So it's those artists that artists and collectives that can see that relationship. So not just a specifically Gold Coast one, even though that's what we care about growing and nurturing. The proof of your relationship to an international representation of what culture might be. And that's what I mean by understanding your specific art form area. Because the concerns of a contemporary techno producer, for example, are quite different from those of a contemporary painter. And what you are going to do within those two different art forms, the project that those individuals do that are going to help evolve their own art form, as well as contribute to that art form's understanding in the region, are kind of going to be you are uniquely different. So again, that's my argument for, wow, yeah, just looking, if you really love painting, like really digging deep into the painting thing, not just locally, but nationally and internationally, and understanding why there is this phenomena of painting. So that's an education thing. And in lieu of there not being an official art school, it has to be self-imposed. Okay, so what have I put for a question like that? What makes the project transformative, new, exciting, or innovative? All right. So I decided to put dot points in here rather than, because it's quite a challenging question, to be honest. It does take a little bit of introspection and subjectivity, because you are trying to describe something that you just don't even know is innovative. It's not realized, it's a seed of an idea. So I tend to like to go towards the rational, what I'm pretty sure is known. So, for example, the first known would be the project presents live electronic music performed to an audience. Very simple answer, but that seems like a fact. That's what it will be. The project transforms the walls from an art space into a venue in which electronic music can be interpreted as artistic, current, and experimental. That seems like a reasonably clear and okay enough statement. Certainly in reaction to, you know, going to Splendor in the Grass and or a rave somewhere, the walls being an art space might change the context of the viewer's perception of this music. The project transforms the walls into an exciting and energetic space to move and dance. You'd assume so, being an electronic music event. And the project reinterprets the existing model of DJ, club, and festival electronic music to be intimate and raw by presenting only live performers. Again, so yeah, it seems to be kind of factual, and you are continually iterating why it might be unique. So I think that word live, I think, was really useful in this particular context. The project operates as a series to inspire and grow interest with a view to becoming a permanent, sustainable addition to the Walls programming in 2020. Okay, that's also, maybe this is a bit of an unknown for most people, but the idea that as cultural producers, we're also interested in sustainability, that the project that we're going to do, we just need a leg up from council, from funding, to get to that next step, to maybe get a bit of exposure, so that our paintings can be regularly bought, or that we can continue to do ticketed items such as sound series, and keep growing it with maybe less support from council. So what I mean by that is they'll just like to hear that. What will this project or activity do for you or your organization or collective? And this is where I think you need to be pragmatic, describe the actual outcomes. Refrain from subjectivity by saying vague things like increase public awareness about mental health when the project proposes an exhibition of art therapy drawings in a small community hall in Nerang. I think this is where brainstorming is important. If you really want to raise awareness about public health, you might want to consider better ways to do that. Now, that's a common thing I see in these applications, because the cultural strategy has a large emphasis on community engagement. A lot of organizations, particularly on the therapeutic level, are wanting to stage an exhibition, which is completely fine. I'm just arguing from the clarity of what the application should say, especially something like that. So if it's to increase public awareness about mental health, 10 people going to a little exhibition in a hall somewhere is not a great way of increasing awareness. So why do an exhibition rather than get like an advertising or like a small like a film student to make a short film that can be shown on YouTube to potentially thousands more people, for example. So brainstorming, you've got to figure out what your actual intention is. You could speculate here about what and how this opportunity will grow your career and future development opportunity, i.e. how this project will help scaffold upon your career trajectory to develop an even bigger project at a national level with potential support from Australia Council or Arts Queensland. And so that's a statement that refers to what I was saying before about this almost leveraging the scaffolding idea of the funding models, so Germinate up to Activate, which then could lead to Arts Queensland and to federal funding. But more often than not, all funding bodies would like to see you secure funding from more than just the one organisation, and that gets super tricky. But start small with Germinate, which is simply could be yourself with your idea or your collective with your idea. It can happen quickly, and then you get the ball rolling in this funding game. Okay, what will this project or activity do for you and or your organisation? So the project will contribute to the cultural profile of the Walls by diversifying its program, as well as providing 12 artists/musicians with a substantial performing opportunity. This is a mutually beneficial exchange for both parties and for the region. The project will attract 40 people to the Walls during each event, but grow its audience significantly through documentation and promotion. As a Walls board member and live electronic artist musician, this project channels my artistic and professional expertise into a project that benefits numerous individuals. At the same time, the project diversifies and invigorates the ecology of the cultural sector in the region. I'm a bit waffly there. That's a little bit of spin. It's especially that last sentence. I'm definitely swinging on hope with that kind of sentiment, and probably writing a little bit inauthentically towards what I think they might want to hear. But maybe just the highlight with that particular question, you can see it's that down the bottom, must be no more than 300 words. I'd be lucky to be getting to 100 words in that paragraph. And I'd encourage you to think about this, the less is more idea of these responses. The having to waffle to get to 300 words is not helping the applicant whatsoever. And so a short series, like 4 sentences or something in there, just being, and they probably could have even been dot points as well. Really, you'd be surprised about how efficient you can be by keeping things honest, authentic, and simple to improve your chances. Guarantee it. Okay. Will you work with partners for your project or activity? If yes, who will they be? Why have you chosen them to work with? Now, okay, so this is the example of the previous Germinate grant, and you can actually see that it's completely asking for something that they've already asked about. So if you've told them about the project and you were clear about the project, you would have actually said who's been involved and who are those partners. So I always felt this was a strange part of the previous RADF, but keep in mind, this question doesn't exist in the new form. So I basically had to just re-explain everything, but with a little bit more detail. So who's one of my partners? It's the Walls. And I just sort of reiterate or re-communicate their value. So the Walls contributes a substantial platform for current and experimental artistic outcomes in the region and provides the perfect venue for the presentation of locally or Gold Coast related produced live electronic music. The project also offers the Walls a program that diversifies its current programming and will help grow their audience. Another partner is the Walls director, Rebecca Ross, who will provide invaluable creative support and supports the project and its cultural potential in the region. The other support that I've already listed is the 12 local or Gold Coast related artist musicians that will be employed. Their output will be presented to new audiences at a professional level, and then the audience members. So I am repeating myself here, but just using the opportunity to provide more detail. This is still relevant to the new iteration of the Germinate grant, and it's related to the community and how they're going to benefit from the project. Again, just if you start in the brainstorming phase of changing your thinking from the subjective to the objective, how is what you're going to do sit within the community? How's the community going to perceive it? And then as an extension to that, how is the committee, the RADIF committee, who's assessing your application, how are they going to perceive it as a contribution to that bigger ecology of culture in the region? So my advice there is put yourself in RADIF shoes by asking yourself, why should you give yourself the money? And you need to be honest about those answers, I'd say. Think about a local resident, an everyday citizen, who has a vague interest in culture, but nothing specific. Like, for example, they like going to the movies at the arts centre occasionally and attend Bleach and Swell events with their friends and family. How are they going to benefit from your project? How are they going to find out about your project? These are important questions. So what that comes down to is value, and more precisely, cultural value and the evidence of your understanding of how you can contribute to it. We really need to see your understanding of your worth. This ties into the innovation question, and they both presuppose a high level of acumen when it comes to your understanding of your art form at a local level as well as a national and international. This is why training and education are important in our industry. You can see how they all start to feed in to themselves. Your understanding of not just your love for the artwork, but its bigger questioning, its relationship to Gold Coast, its relationship to Brisbane. So like other artists that are doing a similar thing to you, and wherever they are in the world, and what are their contexts for showing their work, and what are their actual career aspirations, and where can they go? These are really, really important research concerns that we, particularly I guess, as a committee member in a funding organisation, need to see some understanding of and assume in terms of being me as a contractor of council, having the responsibility to let monies go to an individual, that it's a good investment, that not only can they realise the project, but like this could be a really good thing for this person and the representation of the Gold Coast in their desire to grow culture in the region. Okay, so what did I put? The community has an opportunity to experience live electronic music produced by locals or people with links to the region in a venue that facilitates current and experimental artistic forms. In participating, the community will help establish a new cultural platform, one that differentiates itself from DJ, club and festival culture. The community will also have an opportunity to discover new artistic talent and help sustain the professional practices of the artists, musicians performing through likes and shares of their social media platforms, for example. The Walls provides a fantastic platform for live electronic artists, musicians to showcase their work because it is already known as a venue that encourages current experimental art practices as well as new forms of creative expression. This will help grow the existing cultural dynamics of the region to include a genre known primarily for its hype and spectacularity. Again, it's a bit of a waffle, and I am somewhat repeating myself or things that have been flagged earlier on. This is not such a bad thing to continually infer or reinforce what the value is, but you do need to be careful to not, again, waffle. So again, you can see in all my responses here, I'm not even halfway to the 300 words. So really, really keep that in mind. Efficiency over quantity. And if applicable, how do you think your project activity partners will benefit from this project? So answer factually, if possible. Consider the audience numbers, ticket sales, if relevant, and how that might affect the existing profile. If you are employing people, what experiences or new skill might they develop or learn? And discuss increased exposure. Yeah, so just be rational. That kind of like spiritual growth, or they're just going to have an amazing experience by coming to my performance. It's just airy-fairy. It might be great, but we really want to know how can you measure the success of the project by anticipating 10 attendees to your performance, for example, and when you do the acquittal and you say only 3 people turned up, you can reflect on maybe why that took place. So that's much more clear kind of a clear consideration of what the project is, how you might measure it, and what can happen if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. Okay, so what did I put? The project is going to support the careers, exposure, and professionalism of live electronic artists and musicians by providing an important opportunity to experience performing live through a good quality PA system in an event context. It will be professionally promoted through the Wall's substantial network of art industry contacts, be professionally documented during the event for future promotional use, introduce new audiences to their work, develop their work through engagement with audiences, help provide an impetus to keep making live electronic music, and to perform at their creative and technical best. And I think I'm summarizing it with a little bit more of a philosophical paragraph. Live electronic music is difficult to produce, can be raw, and can sometimes challenge audiences. In a culture in which international big-name DJs headline the majority of events, local electronic artists, musicians face difficulties growing audiences or perfecting their craft through performing. Barbra Streisand not only provides live electronic artists, musicians with an invaluable opportunity to develop their craft through performance, but contributes an important cultural program to the region, one that aligns with events taking place in major international arts institutions such as PS1 New York. Barbra Streisand's cultural capital should incite live electronic artists, musicians to want to perform and audiences to support local and independent practitioners. You see where that kind of is fitting into this acknowledgement of the cultural phenomenon as a whole. And it's almost like you're telling them, yeah, like I know what's going on in New York. Like PS1, every summer they throw these massive parties in the courtyard, big international DJs, and there's like 1,000 people raving at this really hot contemporary art space, which is kind of like a major side institution to MoMA. And it's not just happening there, it's happening in a lot of different art galleries and institutions around the world. So you know, it's kind of like saying, yes, I know, and here's what we're going to do it, because we're current and we're contemporary and we're interested in forwarding culture. Okay, so maybe to summarize all that, I think the best takeaway is giving back. So it's cool that you want to do your thing, you want to be an artist, and the artist's life is particularly solo and sometimes, I was going to say lonely, but not really. It's just individual. Like, you've got to spend a lot of time with yourself, thinking about what you're doing and doing it. Within the funding context and environment, we need to shift that mode of behavior and really start to analyze, what is it that I'm doing that can give back to the community? So yeah, what are you doing to give back to culture, the community, your art form, the responsibilities of the funding body that you're applying for? So I'm particularly, I guess, personally interested in the art form thing. I think that's a really good leverage point for you if you're a little bit unsure about the community thing. So again, to be frank, is we get a lot of applications that really seem like it's a whipped up little project, so that can affect a lot of people. Not even a lot, to be honest, a small little community group. And from my perspective, someone who's been engaged in contemporary culture for such a long time, the artistic side is by the by. On the Gold Coast, generally speaking, I don't see too many uniquely innovative, really imaginative proposals come through. And I don't know, maybe that's just a personal thing, but I'd certainly like to see a lot more. And to me, that's got a lot to do with the community or the individuals in that area really understanding their contribution to art form development. Make sure you've built into your project a reasonably serious indication that you are willing to give something back to the local community. Educational. Ask yourself, will this project teach me something that I can then transfer to the community? Can I transfer my existing knowledge to people in some way? Do I have an existing skill that I can share? Will I learn something culturally valuable through this project that I can share? Employment. Can I employ someone, any more people, and pay them for their services? Or experiential. Can I provide rich experiences for more people other than myself? So all of these things you can start to contemplate on how you're giving back. We're kind of automatically giving back. Either like just staying in your studio, making your work. The minute you move out of your studio and you hang it on your wall or give it to a friend, you're giving back. That's where the experience thing starts to kick into gear. And just being wary or savvy that, yeah, you're already giving back. Now, how do you communicate that to a funding body? All right, let's quickly go over budget. Essentially, it has to be balanced. Now, that's quite often not the case. The income and expenditure have to equal the same amount. It should include the time all people involved contribute. That needs to be calculated in terms of fees and wages. Now, there's a specific document. I still think it's available. The NAVA, which is the National Association of Visual Arts. If you just Google that, there's a document. I think it's called the Code of Conduct. I think it's still called that. And I think it's like chapter 5 or chapter 7, called Fees and Wages is what you're looking at. And there are some benchmark examples of what art workers are expected to receive for employment. You need to account for everything in your project, which includes time, labor, expenses, promotion and marketing, etc. And what I would tend to do is work backwards to figure out what will be the in-kind. So what will actually take place is once you itemize all those things, you realize that that's going to be quite a huge budget, especially if included all your time and labor. So for example, I think for my career level, so mid-career, I should be on, if I remember correctly, it's like $66 an hour for any kind of artistic or cultural activity. That's even just for consultation or developing a project like this. And just add that up over a day, over a week, over a 10-week period, and you'll realize that even just your fees for yourself are quite huge, especially if you're going to be doing a Germinate grant and if you've got anyone else involved. And so where I'm getting at there is once you add all those things up, let's say you get to like $50,000, but you can only apply for $5,000 through Germinate, you pretty quickly realize, okay, $45,000 of this project is given in kind. From an accountant's perspective, that might be sitting on the council side. If they look at that in terms of bang for their buck, they'll be going, wow, fantastic. It's a $50,000 project. We're only paying $5,000. The tick from the accountancy department. Someone told me to think about grant applications in that way many years ago, which does change things. Radical entertain support for up to about 70% of a project. But what's most important, I'm not sure if that number is completely correct, but what's most important is definitely not the whole thing. Beyond Germinate, any evidence of, particularly when the budgets get higher, evidence of support from another organisation, usually really helpful for the applicant. But certainly a lot of your in-kind. All right, this is just, I haven't included the actual numbers for privacy reasons, but this is my Germinate for sound series. You can see the total is 9,600. So budget is balanced, income and expenditure are the same down the bottom there. And you can see that the rate of Germinate funding was $5,000. So you factor that into the budget. But this just gives you an indication of what I had itemized as the expenditure. So I've got the PA, got the mixing desk, the walls hire, fees and wages for the performers, fees and wages facilitator, fees and wages staffing, fees and wages for the technician, promotion and marketing, transport and travel and documentation. So they're the primary things. And then you can see over on the income, we had to give an indication of what our ticket sales might be. That's income. Whatever is remaining becomes an in-kind artist fee. So I did shave, I think, $100 off the artist fee. In-kind promotion, courtesy of the wall. So that's the benefit of working with an existing gallery or context that has a really fantastic mail-out network. In-kind documentation, in-kind event staff, being in-kind walls hire. So yeah, so you itemize all of those things that you need to, and then you realize you start to work backwards and shave off what you can contribute to. But also a budget like this is useful for the assessors to see where is that applicant willing to try and cut some costs. Okay, and the thing I'll wrap up with support material, just to reiterate what I was saying about at the beginning. Please, particularly for RADIF, activate and Germinate, put everything into one PDF. The committee will be so thankful, I guarantee it. Hopefully one day in the future, the council will actually stipulate that in its guidelines. But even if it's not, this is just purely through experience, both sides of the application coin. If you do this, it's not only going to look super professional, it's going to be somewhat helpful for that assessor's representation or understanding of your professionalism, let's say. Okay, so for the sound series in particular, it was audio examples, but what I did is create a singular PDF with screen grabs of each of the artists' SoundCloud page, which is a website that can host their music. And you can also see I've provided the link on the left. So not only is that showing that these people have existing artworks that are available to listen to, but that the assessment committee, if they so desire, can follow those links. I'm sort of the understanding that they probably won't do that, that what I'm trying to do is just show them that these people are professional, that they're reliable, and that they're going to be able to do the performances that I've said that they would do. I also created a document that itemized the job of every person that was participating in the project. So then this is something I sort of did of my own accord. It wasn't stipulated in the support material, but because the questions in Germinate refer a lot to who's participating in the project, who are the other people, who are your stakeholders, that sort of thing, I then itemize exactly what their roles were. So it's just another way of proving that you really know what the project is going to be, who's involved. So yeah, so that's one side of that coin. It's proving that you know, but it's also for you a great benefit, because now you actually have a run sheet for all your the people involved in the project. And I would just send this form to all the different people involved, so including the performers, which sort of states exactly what their responsibilities are, so that they know right from the beginning that they need to turn up and be prepared to plug in and play and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, very useful in terms of development as well as for the application. Now this isn't for that project, this is just my own practice in general, and this is something I've developed after sitting on a lot of committees and having like images come through with no details on them. So it'll be a JPEG or a PNG, either floating on its own in a folder, or maybe within a PDF, if I'm lucky enough to get a PDF with 10 images in it. But no artwork title, no dimension or duration or anything like that. So what I'm trying to do here is show you an example of what I think is good practice, where you as the artist, cultural producer, does all that work at your end. Again, it's more time, it's the admin role of our lives of as artists. But gee, I think it's really useful for the other end, because as you can see in an example like this, these representations of the artwork, or the proposal for the artwork, you can say in this particular case, this is the Urban Oasis Public Art Commission that I was shortlisted for. But you can see the credits down below. So artist name, title, year, a context statement, dimensions, image courtesy, all that sort of stuff. And I've been so pedantic, I guess you'd say, to do this on a regular basis. Every time a work is completed, and I've got documentation of it, it goes through a process where I create this in Word and then export it to a PDF. And I've got a folder full of these ready to go. So this is also about efficiency at my end. So whenever people need support images, I can just quickly access and send them this, and it's got all the details. So in addition, this one, for example, it's got a link to the YouTube location where they can see the actual video work. So it clearly looks like a video work, and that gives them additional support. Additional, well, you can see the work in the way it's meant to be as a video. So yeah, I guess that's what I mean, I think, by a tip. Good professional practice, and yeah, it ultimately saves your time in the long run. It's quite simple to just take these as individual PDFs and then create a longer PDF, like 10. Quite often the limit is around about 10 images. Like a lot of opportunities, whether it's funding or for exhibition opportunities or residencies, the limit is around like 5 to 10 images, usually for support material. So, but they're always quite different. The same thing with word counts. Everything is different. So more often than not, I do have to do quite a little bit of tweaking with my artist statement, with my CV. Not so much with the images anymore, which is quite a cool thing. But yeah, it all comes down to this notion of preparation and being comprehensive, that this admin job is a little bit time consuming. I once upon a time thought I could just write one artist statement and keep cutting and pasting that and sending that everywhere, but well, it didn't last long, because not only does your thinking about your work change all the time, but the word count, the character count changes, and sometimes they want an artwork statement, sometimes they want an artist statement, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I learned pretty quickly that admin, which is all of this I consider to be the admin role of the art life, is wow, probably about 40% of the practice, especially for someone like me that's sort of a conceptual person that has a lot of development or works in progress on a conceptual way, and less commercial, and to the fact that I keep looking for opportunities, like I need to secure opportunities to not only make the work, but for the presentation of the work. Okay, and then CV criteria. If you haven't got one up and rolling, these are pretty useful starting points. Yeah, appointments is it's more to do with employment in the art world, I would say. So under appointments in my CV, I've got things like working as a sessional lecturer at Griffith University, casual employer at the Museum of Brisbane as an art handler, things like that. Education, it's obvious. Solo exhibitions and group exhibitions, differentiate the exhibitions if you've got that yet. And while I'm reading this out, while I'm hesitating a little bit, is if I'm, for those of you that I'm addressing that early on in your career, replace appointments in education with the exhibitions at the top, because your appointments might not even exist yet, and your education might simply be a Bachelor of Visual Arts, so it's only got the one entry, not even an honours. So don't start with something that's got a little bit more entries in it, and then just factor everything else down. Typically, most opportunities only require a one-page CV as well, so you just certainly need to get to the one-page mark. And I know it's kind of stressing, and the common question is, but I barely got anything to put on my CV, which is just a good indication to start doing some things, to do some self-initiated projects, do a show in the garage, make a little Facebook event, get a few people around, take some photos, first exhibition. A lot of us have established ourselves in this career by using the DIY phenomenon. We can't wait for Goma to call and get that amazing mid-career solo show. They'll only do that if they see you contributing to your art form and to your cultural environment in a really substantial way. That's what it comes down to. All right, I'm going to end there. I think this has been quite long enough. Hopefully it was useful. I felt like I was meandering a bit. Feel free to contact myself through Rebecca Ross via the walls for any advice, any further information that I might be able to offer with regard to maybe a specific grant application that you're going for. The walls, and both Rebecca and I are really keen to grow our educational program, and I guess that's in reaction or relation to the fact that there isn't really an art school on the Gold Coast anymore. And we've definitely been talking about this for a while now, and creating a video like this is a good first step. But we'd love to hear your feedback and your thoughts, and yeah, continue to grow culture in the region, and maybe use our existing skills and, more than anything, passion and investment in art and culture, and be able to share that. So So yeah, get in touch, say hello. And at the moment, because we're in the middle of the virus pandemic, you can't come and see us, but in the future, if you're watching this, please come and say hello. Thanks, Phil. Bye.